This text is very famous as well. Okay, I learned about it when I was a Delphine Serre student in qualitative methods. So you know that Americans say qualitative and British people say qualitative. So here is some suggestions for the vocabulary. So, écueil, ampoule aux pieds, stérile, bizarre, étrange, mettre l'accent sur, les représentations. I think les représentations is something you already know. Ennuyeux, exhorter quelqu'un à faire quelque chose, régler un problème à un différent. So, okay. Let me read. As usual, I will read. If you have any questions, you can ask them, but it's better to wait until I finish reading the paragraph, and then I will give you some minutes for you to read through. Okay, and assimilate things. So, first of all, in this text is very famous, and it's about not picking up on the people we are working with or the interviewees' emotions. Okay, we need to have a different standpoint. Okay, we need to keep at a distance from what they feel. So, a typical obstacle to finding the odd cases arises out of our belief that some situation is not interesting, contains nothing worth looking into, is dull, boring, and theoretically barren. Though the following example comes from my experiences doing a documentary photographic project, the general point applies to all sorts of social science problems, as I will later make clear. Okay, odd cases means bizarre cases, okay? And something that is barren, you can be barren as a woman. That means you can't have children, or you can also say that a land is barren. Okay, when a land is barren, nothing can grow on it. Okay, so it's your turn to read now for yourselves.
Excuse me.
Yes, Maëlle.
Can you accept Camille in the meeting, please?
Oh, she's out?
Yes, she's out
Camille,
because
how can I accept her?
Computer.
Oh, poor Camille, and Laura as well. Whoops. Thank you. Okay, next paragraph. Some years ago, I started photographing the rock medicine unit of the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic in San Francisco, as they attended to the medical needs of people who came in the big outdoor rock concerts Empresario Bill Graham put on at the Oakland Coliseum. I knew that what I photographed was what I found interest, not a function of the intrinsic interest of events and people, but rather of my ability to find a reason to be interested in them. Everything could be interesting, was interesting, if I could get myself interested in it. Okay, so you understand that he was attending some concerts, outdoor concerts, and he was taking pictures, basically. Howard Becker was always doing very funky stuff, you know. He was playing jazz, smoking marijuana, and he was photographing people, a young drug-using population. So it's very interesting that you are going to work on drugs, Maëlle and Camille, because that's also what Becker was always doing. So take some time to read that paragraph for yourselves. Okay. So Eva, did you have enough time to read or do you need more time?
No, I'm fine. I just needed something else, so but I had the time to read it again.
Good. So there's nothing interesting per se. So it's whether you're interested or not interested in it. So he understood that, fine. But after attending a number of these events, which went on from 9 or 10 in the morning until well after dark, with the clinic team, which numbered as 125 volunteers, a few doctors and nurses, but mostly civilians, I found myself getting bored. I couldn't find anything to photograph. I felt that I had photographed every single thing that could possibly happen, that nothing interesting was going on most of the time. My finger wouldn't press the shutter button anymore. Basically, he couldn't take any more pictures. Press the shutter button. Okay, he was not taking pictures at the digital era. Okay, he was working with a camera, one of those old cameras we used to have, because Howard Becker is now 80 something, 83 or something like that. So you can imagine.
Madam,
Yes?
is Howard Becker still alive?
Yes. And
Okay.
he lives in Paris and I want to meet him one day. He lives in
Okay.
Paris half of the year. If I find him in the street, he will come to our class. I can tell you that because I'm very good at persuading people, especially men. Okay. He is alive and you can see some of his videos on YouTube. And he speaks French, by the way, very well. Okay, let me read the next paragraph. So he's bored. I finally realized I was picking up and accepting as my own a feeling common among the volunteers of the Rock Medicine Unit. They knew what was interesting, something medically serious, maybe even life-threatening. They got excited and felt that something was happening when, as in one classic tale they told over and over again, someone fell out of the upper grandstand in the baseball park where the concerts took place and broke a lot of bones, or when someone experienced a severe adverse drug reaction, or when, another classic event, someone had a baby 50 feet in front of the bandstand. Those events were something happening, but they were very rare. Most patients wanted an aspirin for a headache or a Band-Aid for a blister, and long periods went by when no one wanted anything at all. Most of the remainder had had too much beer and dope, too much hot afternoon sun and had passed out, but were not in any real danger. When those things were what was happening, the volunteers sat around and complained that nothing was happening. Infected by their mood, I concluded that nothing was happening and that therefore there was nothing to photograph. So now you understand Howard Becker's real nature. He loves to see things happening. People getting severely injured or something. Okay? Have you ever had blisters in your feet? It's terrible. It hurts so much that you can't think of anything else. Do you hike? Do you sometimes walk a lot? Or sometimes when you wear new shoes, when you have a blister, it's horrible. Okay, une ampoule. I don't think there's anything new here that you wouldn't know. And sometimes I'm sure you might also know the word blister.
Bandstand.
Well, maybe it's just the place where the people are playing, because these concerts are outside. So where the band stood, because you see the word band. The word band in English means a group of musicians. So the place where the band stands, okay? I had never heard this word myself. I would say the stage. I think it's an American word because I would use the stage, the word stage. But I didn't do any of these outdoors concerts like Becker. I'm not as funky as him. So, okay, next paragraph. One day I realized that it couldn't be true that nothing was happening. Something is always happening. It just doesn't seem worth remarking on. So I set myself the problem of photographing what was happening when nothing was happening. Not surprisingly, a lot was happening when nothing was happening. Specifically, the volunteers, who were mostly in their 20s and early 30s and mostly single, were mostly still looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right. Volunteering for this event was like going to a big party with some of your favorite bands playing, free beer, an organic lunch, and a lot of nice looking young men and women who shared some of your tastes. Once I instructed myself to photograph what was happening when nothing was happening, I found hundreds of images on my contact sheets of these young folks dancing, conversing earnestly, coming on to each other, and otherwise socializing. This added an interesting and important dimension to my sociological analysis and photographic documentation, showing me that there was more to recruiting the medical team than providing some interesting medical experience. Okay, this is a very interesting thing I experienced myself because when I was studying sociology and methods with Delphine Serre, she told us to carry out an observation. Oh my God. Oh my God. We first with my teammate, we chose to go to a station. We went to Montparnasse and we wanted to have a look at what was happening in the cafes. And I didn't see anything that was happening, okay? I didn't see anything. After that, we spoke to her. We said, what is there to see? Because I don't see anything. She said, oh, then maybe you need to change the setting. You should go somewhere else. So she told us, go to a church. Okay, the guy I was working was a Muslim and he had never been to a church, but I had been to a church. I said, okay, I'm going to observe what happens in Saint-Sulpice because I live next to Saint-Sulpice, but I'm not sure that it's going to be anything better. And when I was there, I just saw nothing. But my colleague had started writing things and had taken a few pictures. And when we started comparing my experience and his, he went to Goussainville, where the population is mainly Black. Okay, my colleague was Black and he was a Muslim. He was from Senegal, and he needed to get introduced he needed somebody to introduce him to a church. So he had a contact somewhere in Goussainville, and he went all the way to Goussainville to see that church. And in that church, the ceremony, the mass, it was all the morning, all the morning. It lasted forever. And in Saint-Sulpice, you went to mass and you left. And what he was showing me was that there was a big party. They were eating sweets and stuff. And one of the huge mistakes I made, because I was a beginner at that time, was that I had imagined that when people went to church, all they did was stand there and pray. And I wrote that in my paper. And Delphine Serre said, no, some children were eating sweets. In the other church, they were eating sweets. So one of the very interesting things that you should observe when you're observing something is that what is expected, what you're expecting to observe and what really happens. So in this case, it's the same thing, I think. They were expecting something to happen, like somebody to get badly injured or something like that. And what he sees, in fact, what he's observing is that they're all hitting at each other. They didn't come here to heal people. They came here to meet Mr. or Mrs. Right, okay? So it's very interesting always to analyze how people socialize in a situation. In fact, the situation is just an excuse to socialize. So you see, this is a very, very interesting text. Okay, I'll let you read now. Hey, some people is coloring my text here. Who's that? I didn't do that. Can you see? Oh, thank you. Okay, so after this very clear example, then he starts analyzing how it can help at a more general level, okay? So the more general statement of the problem, as I've already suggested, is that we never pay attention to all the things that are going on in the situations we study. Instead, we choose a very small number of those things to look into. Most obviously, when we do research that measures only a few variables, but just as much when we do field work and we are paying attention to everything. And having looked at what we've decided to look at, we pretty much ignore everything else that's going on, which seems routine, irrelevant, boring, nothing's happening. Okay, that's a very important point. Then he elaborates on that. Okay, il développe, he elaborates on that, to elaborate on something. So he elaborates on that point. The idea that we should only attend to what is interesting, to what our previous thinking tells us is important, to what our professional world tells us is important, to what the literature tells us is important, is a great pitfall. Social scientists often make great progress exactly by paying attention to what their predecessors thought of boring, trivial, commonplace. I had a similar experience when one day I was trying to understand why my students had not taken the semestrial exam, my L1 students. So I started reading their messages and they were telling me like, oh, I didn't manage to connect. Oh, I sent you an email and you didn't reply, or, oh, well, I replied to every single email. So then I understood, oh, they are replying to my messages on the forum, and this is a ne pas répondre address. Then I realized, oh, I can't connect. I'm entering my ID and it doesn't work. Okay, I realized they were entering their Moodle ID. They were not entering the Pearl ID. So I realized that these things that seemed very trivial, very boring, I made my professor read it and he told me, oh, this is very trivial, this is very boring. But I knew that there was something interesting. So I told him, no, this is showing us all the things that are hidden, the hidden curriculum, and all the competencies and skills that are required to do something we believe is very simple, connect to a platform and take a test. We are evaluating English, but actually, well, not evaluating, making them work on their English. But in order for them to do that, they need to have many other skills. That was the topic of my presentation last week when I did not meet you. So you see, this is exactly the case he is describing here. Look at trivial stuff. Like if my colleagues had seen me looking at their messages and tried to classify them, okay, this one says he has a connectivity issues. This one says this one said, they would have told me, are you stupid? Stop wasting your time. But then I discovered something which is a very important concept of educational sciences. That's to say the hidden curriculum did appear, okay? This hidden curriculum, maybe you know, is a sociological concept that sometimes you go to an exam, an oral exam, and they are evaluating the way you're dressed, whether you're handsome, whether you're not, your hairstyle, if you're white, if you're black, things like that. So it also applies for the skills that are needed that we're not aware of when we tell people to do something. So now we are going to finish the text at last. So we can generalize the procedure I used at the rock medicine concerts to cover all the variations of other people's ideas shaping what we choose to study. Researchers pick up, not very consciously, the ideas of the people they're studying and working with. If they think something is trivial, you, as a researcher, are likely to think that too. These young people liked the sociability that went with the rock concert, but that wasn't serious. It wasn't what you especially looked forward to. It wasn't what you included when you wanted to impress someone else about your participation in the event. Yeah, because usually you do things to impress someone else. So the comedian Mort Saul used to explain that when he was in college, he got involved in left-wing causes for the same reasons other guys did. He wanted to save the world and meet girls. Everyone shares these ideas, and it doesn't occur to you to look beyond them. After all, there's plenty to be interested in the provision of medical services to a young drug-using population, isn't there? Okay, take some time to read through. And the conclusion. Can I go ahead? Okay.
Yes.
It's not just common sense and the prejudices of our companions that blind us to what's there to see. It's not just common sense and the prejudices of our companions that blind us to what's there to see. We often decide what to include and what to leave out in the basis of an imagery and its associated theory that settles all those questions for us a priori. You can say a priori or you can say a priori, okay? All our theories specify something about what we should look at, and by implication, what we needn't bother with, whatever the theory doesn't bother with. Now, this is very interesting here because you're going to understand why we shouldn't do that. That's the very solid core of feminist complaints that many, if not most sociological theories are sexist. Those theories aren't openly or necessarily male-oriented. They just don't routinely include in their systematic exposition of topics of problems some concerns feminists think important, part of what you routinely ought to look for. The male-dominated study on chimpanzee social life, as Donna Haraway has shown, so Donna Haraway is a woman, went on and on about dominance and all the boy stuff without paying attention to the food gathering and child rearing the females did. There's no good scientific reason for that emphasis. And of course, the males could have never spent time trying to push the other guys around if someone wasn't bringing home the bananas and taking care of the kids. The theories that focused on dominance could, in principle, encompass these other matters, but they didn't enjoin researchers to do it in a regular way. Okay, you can read through. Okay. So, you know imagery, les représentations, emphasis, mettre l'accent. To encompass means to include, and they didn't enjoin researchers, they didn't tell them to, they didn't encourage them. Okay, guys, today I'm not going to give you time to read through the text silently for yourselves, because I'm a bit worried about the presentation, and then we should probably ask them questions, debate, and all that. But please do it. I trust that you will do it, because as I said, there's absolutely no point whatsoever in multiplying articles or texts. I want you to know 3 texts very well, 1 documentary very well, and really make the most of it, okay? So now I'm going to shut up and let Maëlle and Camille speak.